Good afternoon and welcome to Civics 2.0, What They Didn't Teach in Middle School. This is a series of talks sponsored by the Pima County Democratic Party, just doing a slightly deeper dive into civic topics. We've been doing this since July of last year, and we were rudely interrupted by the pandemic, but we're back in the saddle now. Our topic today is what's on our ballot, and Gail Kamaras is going to do a little intro as to why our ballots are so complex, and then we're just going to get started. Go ahead, Gail.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. We do have long ballots, and we vote on everyone from president down to constable because of some people over a century ago who were socially active and suspicious of governments that they perceived to be both corrupt and not serving their needs. So much changes and yet stays the same. This so-called progressive era was a period of widespread social activism and political reform across the United States that spanned from the 1890s to the early 1920s. And the main objectives of this progressive movement were eliminating problems caused by industrialization, urbanization, immigration, and political corruption. The movement primarily targeted political machines and their bosses. And by taking down these corrupt representatives in office, further means of direct democracy would be established. This was the era when the election of U.S. senators was changed by a 1913 constitutional amendment. Prior to that date, U.S. senators were elected by federal legislators. So the House of Representatives folks, or the state legislatures elected senators. I'm sorry, it is the state legislators, not the federal legislators. And in 1913, constitutional amendment, now the people elect their senators. So because Arizona's statehood was a work in progress during the early 1900s, the ideas of these progressives worked their way into our Constitution. In fact, one measure that was proposed and resulted in the rejection of Arizona's statehood was a provision allowing the recall of judges. That provision was actually removed. Statehood was approved February 14th, 1912. And in the November election of 1912, that provision of recall of judges was put in, along with allowing women to vote, hurrah, ahead of the US allowing it. So our Arizona framers worked through a process that resulted in a state constitution that included the secret ballot, the direct primary, the citizen initiative, and the referendum and recall of officials, and a lot of other retail democracy. It also included an elected Arizona Corporation Commission with broad regulatory powers that was at that time established basically to oversee railroads, but having it elected meant that the citizens would have more say. So that's my intro to why we have such long ballots. Greer, it's yours.
Okay. So instead of starting at the president and working our way down to the constable, what we thought we'd do is do it the other way around, because we're very, very interested in having people vote the entire length of this lengthy ballot, and not just, the number one hits up at the top, but all down in the weeds here. And so since many of us maybe don't know what a justice precinct is or what the Board of Supervisors really does, you're going to learn about all that today. And we're going to start at virtually at the bottom of the ballot, not with the propositions. We're going to talk about them later in the presentation, but we're going to start with the sort of the most cellular example of an elected office. So Arizona counties are cut up into something called justice precincts. And justice precincts are determined by the number of people living in a certain area. Some counties have 1 or 2 precincts, and these are not voter precincts. These are a completely different set of lines that are drawn that are not coterminous with any other precincts. There's just one more number of precincts that you have to keep straight. So some counties only have 1 or 2 of these justice precincts, while larger counties, such as Maricopa County, can have up to 25 justice precincts. Pima has 10 justice precincts, which means we have 10 justices of the peace and 10 constables. These are elected officials. They go through partisan primaries and partisan elections. As it happens in November, every one of these, all of the constable and JP races are uncontested. They were contested in the primary. So you are only going to have one choice to vote for, but we want you to know who these people are. So justice precincts, the justice of the peace presides over a justice court, sometimes called a justice of the peace court, and they're county courts. We often hear about Superior, Pima County Superior Court. That sounds like it's Pima County, but that's really a state court. These justice courts are the county courts. And even though there are 10 districts in Pima County, 8 are consolidated into one downtown location at 240 North Stone, and 1 in Ajo and 1 in Green Valley. So there are 10 justices of the peace elected for 4-year terms in Pima County, and there are no term limits. Now, here's an interesting thing. To be a justice of the peace, you only have to meet the criteria to be an elected official in Arizona, and which means you have to be 18, at least 18, and you have to be able to speak English. I think you probably have to live in Arizona too for some period of time. But you do not have to be a lawyer to be a justice of the peace, which of course is very different from judges in other courts that operate in Arizona. JP courts handle things like traffic violations and minor crimes, misdemeanors. They have concurrent jurisdiction with the state superior courts over civil cases that are under $10,000. So you might think of this as small claims court. The procedures are less formal, and proceedings cannot be recorded. I have had the opportunity to go see Justice Court in action in support of a friend of mine one time, and I honestly think that some of these JPs have the wisdom of Solomon. They are dealing with very fraught cases, such as person trying to get guardianship of a parent who is losing their abilities, or evictions, or orders of protection. I mean, this is some of the really emotional stuff of life, and these are the cases that go through justice court. JPs do not have to have law degrees. So in addition, all right, so they are elected in partisan elections, and they, as I said, they're of the 10, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that are open for are being reelected this year, but they are uncontested. The other thing in a justice precinct, the other elected office is a constable. Now, a constable is an elected peace officer of the county and their judicial precinct. So constables, Pima County constables serve all of Pima County. Pima County is the 7th largest county in the country, encompassing over 9,000 square miles with over 1 million people. So these 10 constables who are able to have deputies, but as it happens in Pima County, there are no deputies. So there's only these 10 constables. And what they do is they serve papers. They serve criminal and civil papers of the justice court. So these can be evictions. They can be notices of eviction. They can be serving papers such as, I suppose, I don't know, someone might correct me on this, but if you, like a process server for instance, if you scoff off at your jury duty, a constable may show up at your door with a subpoena for you to go to jury duty. I think they say they do that. I don't know if they really do that. So constables, it's important to know, even though they're elected peace officers, they are not part of the county sheriff's department. They perform many of the functions for the justice court, however, that the police and sheriff deputies do for the superior court. They do not carry out criminal investigations, and they don't do traffic enforcement. They are certified by the same law enforcement boards, however. And here's a fun fact to amaze your friends with, is that the only person who can arrest a sheriff in Arizona is a constable. So they have their work cut out for them. They wear badges, but they generally don't wear uniforms or drive marked cars, so many people don't recognize them. Due to the nature of their work, there's often some confusion in the members of the public as to whether they really are qualified to be doing what they're doing. So I would just say that constables are going to become extremely important in this state very soon because of what looks like a wave of evictions that are going to be happening when these eviction moratoriums are suspended. So we want to be electing people to the constabulary who are empathetic people and know what the choices are that they can give to people who are evicting from their homes. So those are justice precincts. Over to you, Gail.
Okay, we're going to bump up just a little bit to the county level. Greer is going to talk about the County Board of Supervisors, but the county also has other elected officials. And Pima County, as Greer said, is a huge county geographically and in terms of the population, but it has a teeny tiny tax base. And this has been a problem for Pima County for quite a long time, but it certainly got exacerbated during the Great Recession, and we're still sort of in recovery from that. Only 17% of the land in Pima County is private property and thereby taxable. So how does that happen? Well, the federal government with Davis-Monthan Air Force Base, Saguaro National Park, the U.S. Forest Service, all of that federal land is non-taxable. Then you have the Thona Otham and the Yaqui tribes, which are also not taxable land. And then there's some other pieces and parcels and so forth that do not get taxed. So a lot of the services are on the back of a very small piece of the county. And they have to do a lot of services. They do wastewater treatment and all kinds of things that they are mandated to do by the state or that the county has chosen to do in the unincorporated areas, that is the areas outside of city limits. So in addition to the County Board of Supervisors, Pima County is required by state law to have certain administrators who are elected by county voters. And those officials actually have a more direct relationship with the state than other department heads, and they do not report to the county administrator. This despite the fact that the Board of Supervisors in the county has budget authority over all officers and departments. But the Board of Supervisors has very, very limited authority outside of the budgeting process over these state mandated offices. So they are in alphabetical order, more or less, I hope, is the county assessor. It is the county assessor's job to identify all property that is subject to taxation, determine who owns the property, determine the property's value, maintain the assessment rolls, and process appeals and exemptions as specified by state law. And so tax increases are a combination of increased property worth and higher budget demands by the various taxing jurisdictions. The assessor has no jurisdiction or responsibility for the taxing jurisdiction's budgets. And those taxing jurisdictions can be water districts, the library districts, wastewater districts, road district, you name it. So the tax rates that they set are basically the job of other agencies. They just say you got to pay them. So these matters are not handled by the assessor. You can find out which specific jurisdictions affect your taxes by looking at the comparative taxes shown on the front of your property tax statement, and you will be amazed at how many different jurisdictions are actually nickel and diming you. The assessor has about 130 employees. Next is the county attorney. The county attorney prosecutes all felonies in the county as well as misdemeanors in the unincorporated areas, so outside the city limits. The county attorney actually wears two hats. In addition to being a prosecutor, the county attorney also serves as the legal advisor to other county officials, including the County Board of Supervisors. And if the County Board of Supervisors or these other agencies get involved in litigation, it is the county attorney's job to represent them in those court matters. This is a big office. They have about 450 employees. Not all of them are lawyers. There's a lot of clerical staff as well. So the next office I want to talk about is near and dear to our hearts, and that is the county recorder, who we know and love. The county recorder keeps all manners of public records, and of course, as we know, is in charge of voter registration and early voting. The actual election stuff is done by a separate election department. So the county recorder keeps records such as deeds and business transactions so that the public can access those records and various pieces of government information as needed. For elections, the county recorder's office is in charge of processing and maintaining voter registration records. Additionally, the county recorder's office administers early voting, including mailing out the early ballots and providing on-site early voting locations for dropping off ballots or voting in person early. The recorder also verifies voter signatures on early ballot affidavits and petitions if as required. The county attorney also, the county recorder also has a fabulous website on which you can find out all manner of information about your ballot, your voting status, your registration. If you go to recorder.pima.gov and look on the right-hand side of the web page, you'll see all kinds of information. And once you mail or drop off your ballot, there's a place there that you can track it, just like a UPS parcel. And the recorder's office has somewhere in the neighborhood of 75, 77 employees. So they do a lot with a little bit. That's about it. Voter Central. Okay, the next elected office is the county sheriff. Somebody asked me recently, why do we elect the sheriff? And it's tradition. We've been doing it this way since the mid-1800s. The county sheriff is a political office. And the primary duty is to manage all those deputies to enforce the law in unincorporated areas of the county. Now, that's not to say if some villain dashes off into the precinct of the city of Tucson that the sheriff's deputy can't follow them. They can. The sheriff is also the one who oversees the operation of the county jail, including the custody and care of inmates. That office also serves warrants and coordinates search and rescue operations. And I can tell you as a hiker, this is a beloved function. They collect delinquent taxes, and when necessary, they can actually evict delinquent taxpayers from their property. The sheriff has legal authority over all county elected officials. And this is a huge department, the biggest by far. It has about 1,500 employees. And again, not all of those are deputies. There's a lot of clerical folks there as well. So next is the county treasurer. And this is essentially the county's tax collector. And the treasurer receives all the revenues and fees due to both the state and the county related to private property, school districts, and special assessment districts. The treasurer disperses funds, invests surplus funds, and takes action against those who have not paid their taxes to the county. And this office has currently 34 employees. So last and not alphabetical, but just because it's a little bit different, is the county superintendent of education or superintendent of schools. This person is elected by the voters in Pima County, and the county school superintendent's duties are many, including but not limited to distributing all relevant laws and instructions to school officials, appointing school board or governing board members of districts in case of vacancies, conducting school board elections, maintaining teacher certification records, overseeing expenditures, and all manner of stuff. And they do all this with 14 employees. And I urge you to check out the website to see what goes on there. That is schools.pima.gov. And I think that's the end of all the elected officials that we have to deal with this year. So Greer, back to you.
Okay, so I just want to say a word about the various school boards that are in Pima County. Actually, the official name for the school board is a school district governing board. And in Pima County, there are 17 school districts and 1 community college district. Members of each school, I'm going to keep saying school board, but you know I really mean school district governing board. Members of school boards are elected in non-partisan elections for 4-year terms, and there are no term limits. So if you're interested in knowing who is running, I believe that there are 6 or 7 people running, for example, for TUSD seats in November. If you want to know about those people, you can go to their websites. Their signs are all over town, but you can also go to a trusted source. Let's say, for example, TEA, which is the Tucson Education Association, and see who they've endorsed. You want to be electing school board members who reflect your values. And if you ever want to see democracy in its most unvarnished and immediate form, I suggest going to a school board meeting. It can be interesting. So those are school boards, 17 of them. And every school board oversees all the schools in their jurisdiction. So that includes district schools, charter schools, private schools, home schools, and virtual schools. And I believe also the superintendent of schools has an additional responsibility to oversee the education of kids who are in juvenile detention. So in addition to our 17 school boards, there is the Pima College District, which is countywide. And there's a board for that, and there is only one election this year for that board, and that is in District 1. Now, the districts for the Pima College board are the same districts as for the Pima County Board of Supervisors. So it's District 1 is the one district in the Pima College board that is having an election this year. And it is contested. There's a Democrat and a Republican running. So you want to take a look at that and see who is endorsing those 2 candidates. I wanted to say something else. Oh, you will see, I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit to propositions. Later we'll talk about the 2 statewide propositions and the 1 countywide propositions, but you should be aware that several school districts have propositions this year. TUSD does not have one, but I think AMPHI has one. Sunnyside, maybe. There are several of them. So you will see them on your ballot if you reside in one of those school districts. So I think that's all I want to say about the school districts. If you don't know what school district you're in, you can look at your voter registration card. And Gail, we didn't really talk about voter registration cards. There's a lot of information on your voter registration card. It starts with your congressional district, which is the federal district, your legislative district, which is your state district. It has your supervisor district. It has your city. If you live in an incorporated city with a city council, it'll have your city ward. It'll have your school district. The one thing it does not have is your justice district, which you have to go to the recorder's website to look up if you don't know what it is. So that is pretty much the end of part one of what's on my ballot. And part two will start with the Board of Supervisors and go right uphill to the presidential election. Thanks very much. Recorder, Georgia, the answer to how many people are in the recorder's office is 72. And the write-in questions. I think you can write anybody in a ballot, but to be effective, you have to, a citizen should garner a great deal of support for that write-in candidate. So if you decide that I should be running against Gabby Kamaras-Kelly as recorder, you're going to get a lot of your friends to write me in, which by the way don't, but before it's going to be effective. I mean, you know, people were writing in Mickey Mouse and Donald Duck, you know, that's like writing my name in. So there has to really be a campaign. And I think a good example of this is Lisa Murkowski in Alaska. A couple of years ago, she was defeated in her primary, and she managed, with a name like her last name, to get a write-in candidate, to get a write-in campaign going where they spelled it right. So it can be done, but it's got to be a very organized effort. Hope that answers that question. Yes, write-in. Oh wait, Beth is saying I cannot write anybody in. There's an official write-in list. Okay, that is a deficiency in my knowledge. So Beth, if you want to write a little paragraph about that, I'll read it out. Okay, let's talk about the Board of Supervisors. This is one of these things I know that when I go around doing my no contact lit drops, and I've also been doing Civics 101 classes for 3.5 years, and it's so vitally important, the Pima County supervisors, and yet very many people who live here, have lived here for a while even, they just don't know. They don't know what supervisor district they're in. They don't know who represents them. And this is really important. I want you to walk away knowing who your supervisor is and why it's important to get the right person into that job. Every Arizona county has a board of supervisors. They have various numbers of supervisors. Pima County elects 5 supervisors every 4 years in partisan elections. There are no term limits. All 5 supervisor seats are contested in November 2020. Now, this has not always been the case. To locate your supervisor district, check your voter ID card or the Pima County Recorder's website. It'll say supervisor district or supervisor or something. So you're in 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5. Even if you live in an incorporated city or town in Pima County, you are also residing in a county supervisor district. The Board of Supervisors has an immense, significantly large impact on our daily lives. They set the county tax rate. They levy primary property taxes, which funds our schools. They adopt the county's annual budget, which in turn funds parks, not Tucson Parks and Rec, but Pima Parks, all the libraries in the county, flood control measures, road and infrastructure improvements. The Board of Supervisors is facing difficult budgetary decisions now in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. And we feel that it's very important that you know the person you're voting for, how they stand. We have some opportunities as Democrats in this election because District 1 has been in Republican hands since, wait for it, 1976. And District 4 hasn't had a Democrat running since 1996. So these are choices now. Every district has a choice. And it's really important that you elect somebody who reflects your values and what needs to get done. So when we're talking about a geographically immense border county with 9,000 square miles and over 1 million people in it, I think it's one of these offices that you really need to be looking at and to know. And I have to tell you, for sheer entertainment value, there's really nothing like a Board of Supervisors meeting. Is every other week, right, Gail? Every other week? Yeah, and you can go on the Board of Supervisors website and you can see, and anybody can go. You just can't carry a weapon in there. And when you get in there, you'll find out why you don't want to be carrying a weapon. And they have a very charming thing where they highlight a dog who is up for adoption at the Pima Animal Care, the PAC people, and that's really cute. Richard Elias really liked doing that. And then it is like a circus without a tent. I mean, you have to go and see it to believe it. Nod if you agree with me, Gail.
What?
You know, you have to be well nourished and well hydrated, and you should go and see what happens, because you are not going to just see the people who are like you. You are going to see people who are so not, whatever you are like, you're going to see people who are not like you. And everyone has got a grievance and everyone has got a point of view. And I haven't been there since the death of Richard Elias, but he handled them like a pro. So there's a call to the public. If you have an issue that you want to talk about as a citizen, you fill out your little slip of paper and you give it to them beforehand, and they call on you, and you have 3 minutes, is it, Gail?
Yes.
3 minutes to say whatever you want. And it's being recorded and it's live.
And they say whatever they want.
You are a star of stage and screen. I mean, I really think it's like a field trip. Everyone should do it. For the past 4 years, the Board of Supervisors composition has been split 3-2 with Democrats in the majority. The two, as I said, the two intensely interesting races are District 1 and District 4, in my opinion, because they are up for grabs. Those are 2 Republican seats, and I think with a good independent and Democratic turnout, those could be flipped, which is going to be an interesting thing. So that's the Board of Supervisors, and that's my impassioned talk about the Board of Supervisors. And let me see. Oh, Beth, thank you. I'll read that. Supervisor meetings are online. Yes, you can see them after. You can watch virtually. You absolutely can, Karen. You go to the supervisor's website, go to the Pima County website, and then go find government Board of Supervisors, and you'll get all that information. Here's the information from Beth Horowitz about write-in candidates. They file a nomination paper no later than 40 days prior to the election, and it will include address, name, party, district, an affidavit with original signature, and a financial disclosure statement if applicable. So there's this set of sort of a paperwork requirement. But I guess after that, they can be written in. So I think if someone were going to do a campaign for a write-in candidate, that candidate would have to do that paperwork and then support and rally all his or her friends to write them in. So that's the Board of Supervisors. Does anyone have any more questions about the Board of Supervisors? Thank you, Beth, very much for that. Yes, Karen, the Board of Supervisors meetings are live. Okay.
I don't know whether they record them or not. That might be possible.
Oh, I thought they did.
Zooming.
I thought they did for people who couldn't.
Yeah.
Hold on, we've got something in chat here.
It's probably not as much of a circus now that everything's Zooming. So, because I suspect some of the wackadoos who show up in person probably don't have computers that were made.
That's very possible. I can't really describe, frankly, what it's like. Okay. So I'm going to talk next. I think what I'm doing next is we're moving on to statewide races. So does anyone have any questions about anything in the county? You can ask it at the end too. We'll swipe through the Q&A at the end. So we're going to talk about the Arizona Corporation Commission, and I have a shout out here to Mr. Paul Stapleton Smith, who is on the call, who when I started out doing my Civics 101 in April of 2017 with my hair literally on fire, he told me, Greer, you need to talk about the Arizona Corporation Commission. And I've been talking about it ever since. So the Arizona Corporation Commission is essentially like the fourth branch of government in Arizona. There's the judiciary, the legislature, and the executive. And then there's the Arizona Corporation Commission. Article 15 of the Arizona Constitution created this as a standalone branch, essentially. It's Arizona is one of just a handful of states that elects its corporation commission, and the original thought would be that if the electors, as Gail pointed out, that give it direct democracy, that they would be more likely to elect more objective people who weren't in the pockets of the industries. And I'm saying that with a completely straight face as regards what I'm going to say later. So the ACC's duties include buying and selling securities, regulating the buying and selling of securities like an SEC at the state level, railroad and pipeline safety, which is still a thing. There are lots of pipelines here, and we've had a couple really spectacular railroad disasters in the last 6 months. And they also certify businesses that want to incorporate in Arizona. One of their greatest powers, however, is regulating utilities. The ACC, Arizona Corporation Commission, determines the rates that the monopolistic energy companies can charge, which services they can deliver, and most importantly, what direction energy policy will take now and in the future. So there are 5 ACC members. There used to be 3, and that was expanded, I think, 10 or maybe 20 years ago to 5. And they're elected in partisan elections, and they serve staggered 4-year terms. I don't believe there's any term limits. I would just like to say here that the minimum qualifications to hold office in Arizona, with just a few exceptions, are simply that you're 18 years old and speak English. I'm not understating that. So who are these people? That's what I asked when I first got interested. Who runs for the Corporation Commission? Well, it could be anything. It could be people who are ex-industry people. It could be people who are using it as a launch pad to something else. They could be business people who have an interest in whatever they have an interest in. They could be environmental activists. They could be a lot of things. But just remember, they have to be 18 years old and speak English. The utilities' influences in helping to elect utility-friendly commissioners has been problematic, to say the very least. In the past decade, anonymous donors, especially post Citizens United, anonymous donors have spent absolutely staggering amounts of dark money. Dark money meaning we don't know actually where it came from. It comes from this organization, but we don't know who's donating to the organization. Supporting candidates aligned with the interests of the utilities. And I think the famous and most hilarious, sort of in a dark way, example was either 2014 or 2016, and I know Paul Stapleton Smith will correct me, where something like $17 million was spent in the last 2 weeks of the campaign season to make sure that the industry-friendly Republican candidates were elected to the ACC. It was a successful campaign. I mean, staggering amounts of money. Currently, there are 4 Republicans and 1 Democrat serving on the ACC. There are 3 seats up for election, and 3 Democrats of integrity are running. This is not a campaign event, but I'm telling you that these people, the 3 people who are running, I'm not going to name them because you can go look them up. They are running sort of as a triumvirate team that is championing solar power. And as someone I know on this call once said, there is no reason why Arizona is not the solar capital of the world. So they're united in their efforts to, and we're not talking about like consumers rooftop solar. I mean, we are, but what we're talking about is massive amounts of solar energy and other green energy sources, such as wind. All 3 of these candidates that are running consider this election to be the race for climate change. And I believe that the party agrees with that. So it's up to you as a voter to decide who determines Arizona's energy future and future energy policy. So should it be me, the ratepayer, or this company over here who is perhaps international and who has shareholders who may or may not live in Arizona? And hold on, is this like the police telling me I should shut up? No, okay. Adelita Grijalva is trying to get on the call. Hold on. Jenny, can you let her in if she's knocking at the door? So the question is, if you don't know, you see these people's names and you're like, okay, I'm not going to be a party voter. I'm going to look at all these people running. Look at them and then go find an organization you trust and find out who they're endorsing. That is going to be my best advice to you. You don't take my word for it. But if you are, for instance, an environmentalist, you might check to see what the Sierra Club has to say about the ACC race, because I can tell you they have a great deal to say about the ACC race. This is my biggest soapbox, this right. And the supervisors. Yes, Club, shut up, Greer.
There are 3 Democratic candidates for 3 seats on the commission. That's correct. So if you are a Democrat, please vote for all 3.
That's right. Vote for 3. Vote for 3. Go in there. 3. Okay, that's the ACC. I could go on a really long time about this. Any questions about the ACC?
Somebody put in a bunch of information about the Republican Party write-in candidate. And let's whether they're on the ballot or not.
Yeah. So what happened is somebody.
Yeah, the information's on the Q&A. So everybody.
Yeah, look on the Q&A. There was a Republican candidate who somehow failed to get his signatures in and didn't get on the ballot. So there's a write-in candidacy going on for that person. Kind of makes you wonder. Okay. No, Jenny can't see Adelita trying to get into the call, so I don't know about that. They have like 3 devices on here. I'm going nuts. Right. And Steve Diamond can't get on the call either. I don't know how to answer that. Sorry, guys. Okay, but people are here. That's who I'm talking to. Thank you. All right, so now Adelita is in. Hello, welcome, Adelita Grijalva. This is not a campaign event, so I'm glad you're here to listen. I'm going to talk about state elections now, the state legislature. So Pima County contains in full or in part 6 legislative districts. 3, 9, and 10 are completely enclosed in Pima County, and 2, 4, and 11 have pieces. Oh, and 14, I'm always forgetting 14. 14 also has a piece in Pima County. So that's just something to keep in mind. These are LDs, legislative districts. And there's usually a great deal of confusion about people who are new to Arizona between CDs and LDs. And again, you look on your voter registration card, the first thing on the left-hand side is your congressional district. That's going to be 1, 2, or 3, at least down here it is, 1, 2, and 3. And that is, I'm in CD, Congressional District 2, Ann Kirkpatrick, and Gail's going to be talking about the federal races. But the legislative district is the next thing on your voter ID card. And that is, there are 30 legislative districts in the state of Arizona. Every 2 years, voters in each of the legislative districts elect 2 representatives to the House of Representatives and 1 member of the Arizona Senate. Every 2 years. So if you don't like how it's going, we have the opportunity as Arizona voters to completely change the House and the Senate every 2 years. Now, of course, we don't actually do that, but we have that opportunity, which means that the people, this is sort of unlike the federal system where senators are elected for 6 years from a larger group of people. This is every little LD. My little LD 10 elects 2 representatives and a senator every single even year election. These elected officials serve 2-year terms. There are kind of term limits. There's term limits in the sense that if I run for Senate, I can serve in the Senate. I can get reelected 4 times and serve my 8 years in the Senate. But then I can go and I can run for the House of Representatives and I can be in there for 8 years. And then I can come back and run for the Senate again and be in there for 8 years. So there's term limits kind of on the face of it, but kind of not really. just as in the federal legislature, the US Congress, legislation is proposed, considered, and voted upon in the Arizona legislature. It has to pass both chambers of the legislature. It has to be consolidated or made the same. It goes to the governor for signing into law or veto. It's just exactly the same process. So here's what's important to know about the Arizona legislature right now. The Republican Party has held the majority in the state house since 1966. That's exactly 1/2 of the existence of the state of Arizona. In the 54th legislature, which ends in January of 2021, the Republicans' majority is 1 seat. It is in our 30 legislative districts, there are 31 Republicans and there are 29 Democrats. So this is an interesting year because this is sort of like, maybe this is a chance to flip the Arizona House. We have to gain net 2 seats to be in the majority party, we being the Democratic Party. In the Arizona Senate, the Republicans also hold the majority 17-13, which means we have to net gain 3 seats in order to become the majority. The Democrats briefly held a majority in the Senate in the early 90s and was split 50-50 in the mid 90s. So again, a net gain of 3 seats is necessary for the Dems to be in the majority party. So why is it important to be the majority party? The majority party controls the flow of proposed bills through the legislative process. They hold the leadership of both chambers, the chairs of every legislative committee, of which there are, I think, 12 in the Senate and 18 in the House. They have the majority vote on every piece of legislation, and they act as, in this case, a counterbalance to a Republican governor. So it's like, and they get better staffing, they get better money, they get better admins, not better, but more. They have more resources as the majority party. I mean, it's a huge advantage. So a Democratic legislature will enable Arizona to start correcting a couple drastic underfundings of, for instance, public schools. It has the goal of curtailing flagrant tax giveaways, which have become the hallmark of modern Arizona governance. It will allow Democrats to make inroads in criminal justice reform, environmental protections, healthcare safety nets, food and housing security, the lack of which has really been laid bare by the COVID-19 pandemic. So if anyone says, well, I just don't know about who's running in the state legislature and I don't really see how it matters, it's much more important to vote in the presidential election, I would rethink that. I think state government is just vastly important to every aspect of our life, possibly more so than the federal government is. Much of the quality of our daily lives is controlled by our state legislature. Now, with such an opportunity, it would be negligent to leave a vote on the table. So I'm going to remind you that you vote for one. This is on the ballot, but some people don't read it. You vote for one person for the Senate, and you vote for 2 people for the House of Representatives. Now, LD11, I'm looking at you. If you are an LD11, there's only one Democrat running for the House seat. In this case, I could suggest that you remember that you are not obliged to vote for 2 people. You should maybe just vote for the one Democrat and not give any Republican your vote. That's just a suggestion to LD11. Just remember, it's not an obligation to vote for 2. You can only vote for 1 if there's only 1 to vote for. So is that clear? Are there questions, Gail?
Not so far. We're good. People want you to, well, we'll get there at the end, talk about the PCC governing board race, but we'll get there when we do.
Yes, I am going to talk. I meant to talk about that in school boards, but I'll do it at the end. Okay. So that was my edge. So I think that is what I have to say about state elections. If you wonder about these candidates, go to look up on your card who is, what LD you're in if you don't know. And if you do know, go look at their sites, find out who's endorsed them, find out what they're about. And with that, Gail, I'm turning it over to you for federal elections.
Okay, and federal elections, I am going to start near the top. We don't even have to talk about the presidential race because it's just ugly to talk about. We have an unusual U.S. Senate race in Arizona this year because of the death of John McCain. Governor Ducey was required by law to appoint an interim senator. Also by law, that person had to be from the same party as the person being replaced. So since John McCain was a Republican, he had to be replaced with a Republican. Also by law, that person must run again in the next general election, which is why we have a Senate race in 2020. So Martha was appointed to fill the seat and was required to run this year. In addition, because McCain's Senate term ran from 2016 to 2022, whoever is elected this November will only serve out the remainder of McCain's term and will have to run again in 2022, should that person so choose, for the full 6-year term. Right, clear as a bell.
And how much money has been spent in that Senate race to date?
I don't have a clue, but it is in the hundreds of millions, I'm sure.
I think it's pushing 70 million.
Okay, it is.
For a 2-year seat, right?
It's insane, absolutely insane. And it is, yeah, it is one of the big 5 focuses of this.
The other thing, Gail, that is worth mentioning is that because this Senate race is essentially a special election nestled into a general election, if whoever wins the race will be sworn in as soon as the Arizona election is blessed and certified, which is the 30th of November.
May be sworn in. I don't know that they have to be sworn in, but we'll find out in the next exciting.
Oh, that's interesting.
So besides 2 U.S. senators, of course, we have 9 U.S. representatives in the state of Arizona. And we have 3 of them down here in southern Arizona. So 3 of the 9. And again, these folks have to run every 2 years, which means they do nothing in their lives except raise money and go to meetings. All 3 of the incumbents are running again. In Congressional District 1, Tim O'Halloran, who just put forth a terrific energy and environment bill. And in CD2, Ann Kirkpatrick, and in CD3, Raul Grijalva. I think Kirkpatrick and Grijalva are both safe. Tom O'Halloran, maybe not quite so much. And if the US Census is ever finished, and as expected, Arizona gains an additional US House seat, the Arizona Redistricting Commission, which is in the process of winnowing down applicants, will draw new congressional and state legislative boundaries, and all of this may change. So that's where we are on the federal elections.
A comment about Tom O'Halloran and CD1. It is a very strange district. We don't really have gerrymandering in Arizona. We have the kind of the gold standard for redistricting in this state. But because of the, we have 9 seats and we've got to divvy it up somehow. We can't increase the number of seats unless the census tells us we can. So Tom O'Halloran's district starts up there in Oro Valley, and it goes clear up the eastern side of Arizona to the Utah border and sort of wraps around. It's absolutely immense. And this is Tom O'Halloran, walking a knife edge between, these like kind of blue areas of Flagstaff and in Tucson, and massive stretches of rural Arizona between. It's a tough road.
So
okay.
That puts us on to the PCC and the initiatives.
Okay, so I did miss, when I was talking about school boards, I should have talked about the Pima College Governing Board. There is one race in that, and the Pima County Governing Board is set up in districts. and the districts are coterminous with the supervisor districts. So District 1.
That is Pima County College.
What did I say?
You said Pima County Governing Board.
No, that would be silly. Pima College Governing Board. Pima College PCC. Anyway, there is one race going on, and only the people who live in District 1 will have this option. There is a contested race between a Democrat and a Republican running for that Pima College board. So that's Kat Ripley is the Democrat and Ethan Orr is the Republican. So only people in District 1 will have that option, and the rest of us won't. All right, so we're going to talk about propositions really quickly. So ballot initiatives and propositions, a lot of times we're used to seeing, especially in these presidential year elections, pages and pages of propositions. Well, we didn't have those this year because the legislature got, basically cut off at the neck in March. So there were a lot of citizen-initiated petitions and legislative-initiated petitions and stuff going on, but only 2 of them made the cut. And I'm just going to give you a quick little funny thing to know, so when you can sort of decipher your ballot in future years, the numbering of the propositions, anything that's in the 100 series is a constitutional amendment. The Arizona Constitution, which has existed for a very short number of years, basically since 1912, has been amended, I think, more than 158 times in that, starting with 6 months after it was passed. So there's tons of constitutional amendments. It's actually quite easy to change the Constitution of Arizona, unlike the federal Constitution. So anything proposition you see with a 100, that's a constitutional amendment. The 200 series is initiated legislation, and this can come from either a citizen petition or it can actually be initiated by the legislature itself, which when I first moved here, I thought, what the heck is that? Why don't they just pass the legislation? But it's complicated because what happens with initiated legislation with these propositions is it's very difficult to repeal unless you do you do a referendum at that point. So a 200 series is legislation. A 300 series, like Prop 305 in 2018, is repealing legislation, which is what happened in Save Our Schools, Prop 305. The 400 series is reserved for anything that's local. And this can be county or city or anything. So that is your little cheat sheet for what the impact of these various propositions might be. So the first one I want to talk about is Prop 481, which is a county-wide proposition. Now, some of you in these school districts that are having propositions, there are going to be more 400 series propositions, but they're specific to the school boards. So 481 is a Pima College governing board proposition. And what it does is Arizona law caps the amount of tax-based revenues a community college can use for operational purposes. This is a proposition adjusting the Pima Community College's expenditure limitation. This limitation was last set in 1970. I think it was 1970. What did I had that right written? Oh, 79 to 80. So it's pretty old. And what this does is the yes people say that Pima County voters should increase the amount of money Pima Community College can spend on students at no additional cost to the taxpayers. The money already is there. PCC has the funds. This will simply grant them flexibility in how they spend it. The no position on this is that there's been a lot of wasteful spending habits and bad financial management. I cannot speak to the efficacy of these two arguments, the truth or the accuracy of these arguments. But if you want to look into it, there will be some pros and cons in, I'm sure, one of the election pamphlets that you get. But that's what 481 is. It's basically allowing PCC to have more flexibility in how they spend money they already have. Okay, so it's not going to cost us anything. The first statewide proposition I want to talk about is Prop 207, which is smart and safe. And that is legalizing cannabis or marijuana for personal use for persons over the age of 21. And if you go to the Arizona Secretary of State, azsos.gov, is that right? AZSOS? I think it is. azsos.gov. And go to propositions. You can see a lot of pros and cons that'll be coming out in the election materials that's being mailed now. There are people who feel strongly one way or the other about this for a large variety of reasons: social equity reasons, criminal justice reasons, personal or religious reasons, whatever they feel about it, medical reasons. But the Pima County Democratic Party has voted to remain neutral on this. They're not for it, they're not against it. And you should look at that carefully and make up your mind as to whether this is something you want to vote for. It's come up several times. It came up in 2016. They were kind of battling propositions, and it wasn't clear, and as a result, when voters get confused, they just vote no. I mean, that's a truism. So they got confused and they voted no on all of them. And I just think how much easier the last 4 years would have been, but that's just my opinion. So Gail's going to talk about 208.
Okay, Prop 208 is the Invest in Ed proposition, which is going to potentially raise nearly $1 billion a year, theoretically, for schools and teachers. The way it's constructed, it is a 3.5% surtax on taxable income in excess of $250,000 for individuals and $500,000 for couples. What that means is if you are an individual who makes $251,000 taxable dollars, which is different than real dollars, you will pay $35 on that $1,000. The way the money goes out is that 50% of it will be to hire and increase pay for teachers and professional classroom related people like nurses and librarians. 25% will be for teachers' aides and bus drivers and lunch ladies and other custodians. 10% will be for mentoring and retention of new teachers, which is a serious problem. 12% will go to technical and career education, our JTED program. And 3% will be for scholarships for people who intend to become teachers. So that's the basics really quickly on 208. We didn't put this in, but I just want to mention judicial retention. This is largely a waste of time. This is largely a waste of time and energy. But the civic engagement beyond voting folks who we know and love from teaching us about what goes on at the legislature, their website is CEB as in boy, V as in Victor.us, has a little primer on a couple of judges they want you to go thumbs down on, including 2 Arizona Supreme Court justices, Andrew Gould and John Lopez IV. So just mention that. Check out cebv.us for judicial retention. Basically, you can skip the rest of them because in the entire history of judicial retention, only 4 judges have ever been kicked out. Finally, recorder, not Pima, finally, Pima okay. Recorder.gov 724-4330. There are early voting options galore in terms of early ballot drop-offs, voting in person early at libraries, recorders' offices, and so forth. Please get your ballot in the mail or however you get it, turn it right around, either put it in the mail where it is safe in Pima County without a bloody stamp and mail it right back. Do not delay, do not stop, go, do not collect $200. And that's my piece.
Okay. I just wanted to add something about Prop 208, and that is the Arizona Democratic Party and the Pima County Democratic Party have endorsed 208, as has the teachers union and very many other people. And I ask everyone who's listening to this we knew this was going to happen, and it did happen. There is an opposition narrative that talks about how this is going to hurt small businesses. And you hear it again and again and again from the opposition side, how it's going to hurt small businesses. There is no tax on small businesses. This is an individual tax, as Gail said, only on, dollars beyond $250,000 for individuals and $500,000 for people filing jointly. Small businesses are not involved in this at all. And you'll just hear this hammered home. It's a talking point, and it is incorrect. Okay. Is that all we're going to say? Is that enough? Are there questions?
I could clarify that more. I got the last question.
Okay.
But just to clarify, just a little bit more on 208, it is a tax on taxable income. This is not your income. This is not your federal income. This is not your federal adjusted gross income. It is your Arizona federal adjusted gross income after all the exemptions and deductions, which reduces most people's tax by at least a third and sometimes by half. I looked at my last year's tax return. Go check your last year's tax return and see how your adjusted gross income that you started with in Arizona and your a taxable income that you ended up with in Arizona is different. And you will see that in order to pay this tax as an individual, you would probably have to make between $350,000 and $500,000 at minimum.
Thank you, Gail.
I'm all on it.
All right. I knew you were. So we have from one of our listeners.
We got a couple more questions here. Let me.
Okay. I'm going to talk about supervisor salaries now, because we've got all sorts of people all sorts of candidates weighing in on what the salary is here. So by law, the salary for supervisors is set at $76,600 annually, plus benefits, of course. Staff salaries range from $18 to $20 hourly rates to $80,000 for at least one of the chiefs of staff. So, and then there's a huge amount of money that's discretionary to the supervisors, something like $400,000 that can be allocated as a supervisor sees fit. And so it's a full-time job with good bennies. Gail?
Okay, I'm looking at a question. It says, I'm on the permanent mail voter list. Once on a primary election, I signed the envelope but forgot to date it. Is that something that would invalidate my vote? I am not sure about that one.
I did that one.
Okay.
I did that one time, and I called and I was like, oh my God, I didn't put the date on it. And the recorder told me that is not a deal breaker. It's only a deal breaker if there's some other problem, but she said that it would only be a problem if it looked like the ballot had been jimmied open and closed again. That's the only reason they would worry about the date.
Okay. The Pima County Recorder's Office does try very hard to cure ballots. So if you have messed up, or if your signature has changed, or you broke your arm and you can barely sign it and it looks weird, they will contact you if you put your blessed phone number on as you're supposed to. They'll try to contact.
It's quite a rigorous process. I've heard that the instance of fraudulent votes in Pima County stands at 0.04%. It's not large, and there's a crew of signature verifiers who are trained, and then if anything is questionable, it goes to a tier 2 and then to a tier 3 support. They will do everything in their power to cure your ballot.
Okay, one final question. Somebody asked to repeat the names of the 2 Arizona Supreme Court judges on whom civic engagement beyond voting has given a thumbs down. That is Justice Andrew Gould and Justice John Lopez IV. There are also several Court of Appeals judges and one Superior Court judge here in Pima County, Paul Tang, T-A-N-G, who is getting a thumbs down.
if you go to cebv.us, it's not just someone's opinion that they're doing here. It's really interesting. There is a cheat sheet with the thumbs up and thumbs down, but they also provide a backup Excel spreadsheet talking about how they came to these conclusions. It's rigorously researched, and the CEBV people are remarkable. I think the roots of it were in the Save Our Schools movement in Phoenix in 2018, 2017. And Gail has put the CEBV, that's in chat, Gail?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's definitely worth looking at their website because they're very progressive, and they are, as I said, are quite rigorous in their researching and very transparent as to how they're coming to their conclusions.
Okay. I'm just looking at.
Are we good? Is everybody happy? Is everybody learned more than they came in here knowing?
Yeah. Beth wants us to post the deadlines for registering and so forth, but I think that was all over the Pima County.
It is. October 5th at 5 p.m. October 5 at 5 p.m. is the registration deadline for voting. And what's that? And you can do that on servicearizona.com to register to vote. Anybody else? Isn't this fun? Don't we feel civic? This is great. I'm so gratified that all you people made time to come and talk to us.
Oh, there, I disappeared.
We good? Like we're losing people. They're like flowing out. Okay, right. This is the end. This will be recorded. This is, oh, did I turn the recording on? Yes, I did.
I turned it on partway through.
What a loser I am. Okay, so at least it'll be partially on the Dems YouTube channel, and you'll probably hear about that. Okay, everyone, thanks very much.
Thank you, Greer.
Thanks, Gail. Bye.
Bye.